So I think we just have like half an hour, right? 30? Jeez. So thank you, all of you, for all your questions. They were super interesting, and we are going to try to revisit some of these topics now in this roundtable, and also going more deeply into some gray areas that I think are still a bit non-explored. So first of all, thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you, Michael, for being here in Madrid today, and for your support for all this project. Without AHEC, Europe, and global AHEC, it wouldn't have been possible. So thank you again for bringing this opportunity to AIDI to learn with you and from your processes. So I wanted to start or go a bit backwards to be one of the first things we talked about this morning, which were your two interventions. So I think it is already very clear for us that your work model works. It is sustainable, it is actually working, so this is a very good lesson. My question is about how do we export this model out from the USA and bring it to other places of the world. And I mean, by this I mean, okay, we have still this 2/3 of the wood which is not being used, and if it was just in the terms of the USA, obviously we could use it and export it to worldwide, let's say. But what happens when other places in Asia, Africa, Latin America, they all, Europe, we always start implementing this model? What's your thoughts and policies about this change, this possible change?
Not sure I quite understand you mean as far as forestry practices or wood use and expanding the use of wood?
More related to the expanding the model, not just the wood, but the model you are developing and you've been developing for this year. What happens whenever the rest of the world implements it too? That increases competition, so it also increases the prices or different situations. It's a broad question, just to know your thoughts.
Well, I think, ¿lo hablo en español o en inglés? Yo creo que ya está pasando, que el mundo y la industria nuestra ya está globalizada. Cuando hablamos de la producción de muebles, ahora mismo, hace 15 años o 20 años, Europa, Italia sobre todo y Canadá, producían por lo menos el 70-80% de las exportaciones de muebles a nivel mundial. Ahora, entre China y Vietnam, pues ya son más del 90% de esos dos países.
Claro, pero no son modelos sostenibles.
Depende, porque mucho de lo que ellos están haciendo es importando la madera de otros sitios. Lo nuestro, por ejemplo. Nosotros exportamos más madera a China que al resto del mundo juntos. Así que mucho de los muebles fabricados en China que terminan en Estados Unidos, o terminan en Europa, o terminan en Japón. Y la forma de implementar el modelo de sostenibilidad, eso tiene que venir de dos sitios. Primero, de los consumidores, pero claro, los consumidores pensamos más en nuestro bolsillo muchas veces que en el bien de todos. Así que tiene que venir del gobierno, de los gobiernos. Y eso lo hemos visto con el EU Timber Regulation, por ejemplo, y el Lacey Act. Si vamos a importar muebles de Japón, vamos a importar muebles de Vietnam, tenemos que saber de dónde viene la madera que están utilizando. Y esas pólizas yo creo que sí están cambiando el negocio a nivel mundial y está haciendo la competencia un poco más justa. Porque claro, el fabricante que puede usar madera ilegal, que viene de no sé dónde, pues siempre puede producir algo mucho más barato que el que paga los impuestos, que compra madera sustentable. Así que las normas tienen que venir de los gobiernos mundiales, pero yo creo que el driver tiene que ser consumidores.
Entonces, asumiendo que uno de los grandes desafíos es esta trazabilidad, esta falta de transparencia en este proceso, desde AHEC, ¿cómo vosotros actuáis un poco como lobby haciendo políticas o actuáis generando deseo de cambio en el consumidor? ¿Cuál es vuestra estrategia?
Las dos cosas, porque nosotros somos, si quieres, Joana.
Yeah, I think we're in a position where we've got funding and a resource that we've been able to demonstrate how you can show that sustainable model. There's a lot of good sustainable forestry going on around the world. You know, some of it's plantations, some of it's natural forests. I think it's like talked about policymakers, and it's actually changing, you know, those policies so that there is a more level playing field. And what I mean by that is, Mike mentioned about legality and laws for timber. There's a lot of negative press about deforestation, and yet we're the only renewable material. So why do we face that sort of adverse amount of, you know, negative focus when actually it's taken 20 years or more to start discussing plastics? You know, why is it taking so long? Why have those businesses? Because policymakers and the general will within industries has not been there. So I think what I've seen happen in just a year, the debate on plastic has changed incredibly, because there's been consumer awareness, there's been media profile on it. We're about to see the same about concrete. You know, at last, some of the major media outlets are beginning to focus on, you know, just what a damaging industry that is. And that ought to then feed into changes in policy. So all we can do is take the small resource we've got and tell our good story and learn where we have to be better, and just be transparent. And we've done that. We're not the only ones doing it. Maybe our voice sometimes is a bit louder, and we do these kind of projects, and some of the ones we put, you know, in London, in museums, in Milan, so we get a big voice. You know, we are able to, you know, resonate those messages a little bit more, because the wood industries are not like some of the other industries, which are huge lobbying, where big multinational companies put in millions of dollars. You can very easily change policy if you've got that kind of money. We don't have that. You know, we are very fragmented industries, wood industries. We're learning to come together. We're learning to talk to designers, architects to help us. I mean, some of the most influential voices that we have at the moment are the architects we've worked with and the designers we've worked with. You know, they're doing a better job than we can. So that's what it's about, is just keeping those messages.
I think also, can I add in this? Yeah. I also think that the idea that we're going to run out of wood is maybe a distraction from the major issues that we need to discuss. Projections show that the world population is going to sort of stabilise around 2050 at about 10 billion. You know, there's a lot of wood out there to use. I don't think, even if we were to continue to be a more wasteful society, which I don't think we're going to, even with 10 billion people, I don't think we're going to consume all of the wood in the world. You know, there was a recent study that kind of evaluated the potential to sequester 100 years worth of developed world carbon by just increasing the forest cover in the world by 25%, which was all done on land that looked, you know, reasonably primed for reforesting. So if that's the case, and we can absorb 100 years of carbon dioxide and pollution, I'm pretty sure there's enough there for furniture and buildings to be made out of this material too. So let's just park that and presume that we ain't going to run out of wood within, you know, the kind of early parts of your careers. And if we do start running out of wood, then let's work with new materials like mycelium. You know, there's loads of other materials that can come in alongside wood, which don't have to be steel, aluminium, concrete. Let's use wood to replace the bad stuff now, and as we use that up, better stuff will come online that can work alongside wood too.
Okay, so yeah, it has. I think your position or our position requires this long-term thinking, because obviously this twist takes a long way to grow, etc. So it's a change of mindset that is really shouldn't be so difficult to make, but we need to keep on working on making this, thinking, I don't know, maybe 30, 50, 100 years ahead of us somehow. So,
and that, if I can add, that's very difficult when you've got politicians thinking short-term self-interest. And boy, from my country, we know that right now.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. We're having a competition as to who's hurting more right now, because I live in London and he lives in Washington.
We win.
No, I think we're just about to get somebody to compete, unfortunately. But I think also in industries, you've got too much of a short-term, there is too often a short-term view as well. And the pressure on society and competition and products. And so that is difficult. If you can try and change that, we're in a very luxurious position that we're tasked by our industry to look ahead and to try and position our messages and what we do in the longer term, and we're very lucky to be able to do that. I don't have to sell wood today to make a living, but it can be done, and there are, as Sebastian said, there are great examples of industry in all sectors, but also in ours, that are making that change.
And I think that's a good point, David. And when you look at our industry, the hardwood industry, for example, they're not responding to shareholders by and large. What a lot of people don't understand about the hardwood industry is it's not made up of big corporations, big companies. The vast majority, probably 95% of hardwood companies in the US are family owned, and they're multi-generational. So they're responding to their own needs, to their family needs. They're not responding to shareholders to make quick profits now, the way you see in a lot of other industries. We need this quarter's profits now, whereas small family businesses have the luxury of looking much more towards the future.
And actually, my knowledge of the timber industry, the importers, the distributors in Spain, is there's still a lot of family businesses. We know them, and it's a very similar model. So again, they're trying to position themselves in long-term attitude. I think what's missing sometimes is that there's lots of people doing interesting things, and we're not connecting. And that's what we're trying to do. The more opportunities we can connect our ideas, learn from you learn from us and our material experience, and and through the media, and we can communicate these things, so we can try and connect a bit more. And a lot of your examples of what you're doing is connecting people and ideas, and we do the same. Then you can have more of an impact.
That brings me to my next question, which is exactly about this fragmented network on one side, and then this need of generating awareness through storytelling and transversal collaborations with artists, designers, architects. So I would love you to share briefly some of your most valuable learnings from these experiences, just for some inspiration.
Wow.
Can be good ones or bad ones.
You said we only have half an hour.
Yeah,
there's so many. You're going to help me in a minute because you've been part of some of these stories. We're promoting wood. We're marketing for an industry, but actually what we're also doing is telling stories. Narrative is so important. And I learned recently going to see one of the big retailers in the UK who have, people on the top floor make policies about their environmental policies, and they have reams of paperwork, and boxes you have to tick. But when you actually get talking to them, what their customers want is narrative. They want story. They want to understand a little bit more about what they're looking at or going to buy, where it's come from, how it's come together. Because if you can understand what the material is, how it's grown, its impact, how it's made, you'll begin to understand that you're looking at something that's well designed and well made, or is sustainable. I think so. These stories are really important, and these collaborations, they come often from meeting the right people or connecting the right people, or we'll have an idea. I mean, you talked about the wish list. I think it started for me, one anecdote, and it involves the company Benchmark and the Out of the Woods. And I think we bought the small books that we created with the Royal College of Art. There was an opportunity to work with a product platform at the RCA a few years ago. You know, a well-known designer came to me and said, I'm teaching on this platform. I really want to give my students an experience of, you know, workshop, see how industry works. They've got great ideas. Could we do something with you? And I said, yes, we just learned about life cycle, we could build that in. And we did a whole project. And I think 14 student groups were chosen in the end to make these seats. And Benchmark agreed to come along and judge and sit, and we were looking at paper designs, and they brought in models, and there were sort of chairs they half assembled in the studio, and you know, we were sitting on them, breaking, right, start again, and we did all this, and once they got their designs finalised, the guy that runs Benchmark turned around, and he hadn't told me. He said, right, we're not going to make your prototypes for you. You, the students, are going to come and stay in my workshop, and you are going to make your product. And I was like, he hadn't told me, and I was, hang on, that's not what we agreed. It was the most magical thing. And you were involved as an advisor and craftsman in that project. So these students, some of them had never had workshop experience, came and they camped in the grounds of Benchmark, and we watched that process of them seeing how their design evolved and learning from these craftsmen. And that was probably a turning point for me, because that connection between, you know, design, great craft can't happen without, you know, great design, and the other way around. So we've taken that model and we're doing it again now with Legacy, but with different people, different players. But the idea is the same. And in a way, we're setting you a challenge here. Those that get selected to go through to the process, we would love those final pieces for you to engage and get involved in the workshop and learn, and design workshops learn from designers as well. However long you've been doing it, that's another thing I learned.
And that's one thing we've seen elsewhere in the world that we work that I think is fundamental, and why someone like Sebastian and his experience is so important, because great design on paper is not great design if it can't be fabricated. And I think that connection between what looks beautiful on paper and what can actually become a physical reality, I think sometimes is missing. So making those connections, I think, is very important.
What did Terence say when we were doing the wish list project? Terence Conran said you can't design something properly unless you understand a little bit about how it's made and what it's going to be used for. And that sounds so obvious. But yeah.
My next question follows a bit this path. You know, we are mostly product and industrial designers, so we are really focused on tangible and things like products, objects that we can take home somehow. So we've seen many examples of wood being used in structural and architectural uses. But I understand that product, and Sebastian, you know well, works in a slightly different way, because it's subject to moods and fashions, and sometimes those things change faster than what the designers also sometimes can deal with, or even the industry. So how, like, this is also again a super broad question, but with this model of consumption in one side, and we've seen now what has just happened to plastic. So there is a gap in between. There is a gap on daily use products. Could this, for instance, this gap be filled with some sort of wooden derivative products? Is there any research you've been doing on this, like a smaller scale daily use?
There is, there are plastics now extracted from wood.
Mm-hmm.
There's a material called densified wood, which is where they basically superheat and then compress wood, and it's like, that really hard plastic that sometimes makes up like lids of pots and things like that. Almost like a Baker-like kind of thing, made from wood. There's stuff called nanocrystalline cellulose, NCA, which is...
There's one for you.
Yeah, sorry. Nanocrystalline cellulose. Just NCA is easier. Which is basically the extraction of the kind of cellulose and hemicellulose within the wood, which is then recreated into this material, which is stronger than steel and obviously much lighter by using that cellulose structure. Because the beauty of wood is that it is basically, cellulose is the most abundant element on the earth. And that's what wood is. So if we can either work with it in solid form or use kind of energy-intensive extractive processes, we can pretty much make it. We will see a time in the next 20 years where single-use plastics or the equivalent are made of plant-based material.
So are the limiting factors at the moment then presumably the cost and also the technology to process?
Yeah.
So it can be done, but to do it on a scale that can be affordable.
The basic limiting factor to everything at the moment is that polluters don't pay, right? That's the basic, simple thing. Make polluters pay, so organic food should not be more expensive than non-organic food. The people that are putting pesticides and nitrogen in the landscape should be more expensive than the food that's grown naturally. And this is where forestry will be really, really favoured, because if you look at current bioplastics, people are growing maize. Maize is quite an inefficient way of creating cellulose, actually, and you have to do it in a monoculture, and generally it requires irrigation, and generally it requires pesticides, herbicides, etc. It also creates this kind of quite... so I think there was a recent article in Diseño which talked about how the byproducts of current bioplastics, if they accumulated in the areas of the ocean that we currently have petrochemical plastic and started to decompose there, it would begin to acidify the ocean in a really, really bad way. So actually he was arguing that it's better to just have carbon stored in these vast kind of plastic areas in the ocean. That's actually better than having it in bioplastic, because you'd be creating a different environmental product because the normal plastic doesn't degrade. So there's all sorts of like minefields that we're facing. But actually, every time you look at using trees as the basic resource, it seems to provide an answer somehow. So I'm pretty optimistic about how we can get around this with other materials. But right now, maybe people will look back at this era in 100 years' time and go, wow, that was the time when everyone was just using wood because they didn't know what else was good. And that's fine. If it goes out of fashion when there's alternative materials around, then that's okay. But let's just focus on it now.
So, there is this really complex and big thing, which is the life cycle, and basically it. So, we are maybe, as young professionals, still a bit overwhelmed by this huge thing that we don't fully understand. We can perhaps perceive it as a constraint, because there are so many things to bear in mind. Since you are probably three of the more biggest experts on this field, how would you recommend these designers who are going to start this really complex process? How would you tell them to approach to this life cycle assessment? Maybe we can go a bit backwards to this cascaded use and give them some tips, or I don't know, what do you think about this?
I think everything seems complex when we're not familiar with it. And I think with time and young designers, I think you have a perfect opportunity to be part of the solution in this. And if we look at it to take a parallel with nutrition, 30 years ago, we didn't know what we were putting in our bodies. But now we have, on every label, we know how much salt, how many calories, how much everything is in what we consume. Well, the same can be true with the materials and the products we make. there's a thing called environmental product declarations, which there's been a lot of talk about, but really very little action on. And it has the potential in everything that we have of looking how much energy was required to make this, how much, what is the life cycle, how much carbon was emitted to make this product. That again, that is something that can be legislated, that can become as common in our life as we are now used to reading labels on the food we buy. And I think that's a step that needs to come sooner rather than later.
I'll bet many of the people in this room have a calorie counting app on your phone, right? Maybe you don't. Okay. They're all a healthy bunch. But it really is as simple as inputting. With those apps, you like to say how long were you on the treadmill, and then how many burgers did you eat, and it'll tell you whether you're going to get fat or not. And it's basically the same thing, right? It's input. It's 2 types of input, and then it gives you your figure. Don't be panicked by it. It will all start to make sense as soon as you start doing it. And these guys will help you absolutely understand it.
I think that the bigger picture, though, is how do you get that influence to policymakers and industry. What we've learned working with a few industries with our modelling system for wood, and bear in mind, the life cycle engineering kind of started in the German car industry and spread from there. So there's big industries who've been doing it for a long time because they have to understand the impacts of every element of what they do. What we learned, which is what they learned, that a lot of environmental processes, you lower your environmental impacts by looking at all your processes. You also lower your cost. There is often a direct correlation between environmental saving and real cost saving. And particularly in the wood industries, when you start looking at the number of processes you make and you think, well, actually, I could reduce that makes it cheaper. I don't on your scale, I don't know if you've done that, but I've talked to people in industries who begin to realise that, and that's a proper incentive for them to start to look at it, even if it's just in that basic way and it's not on a label. At the other level, there are things going on at European level. Some of these databases we use are going to be put into the public domain. These large accounting databases where every kind of energy mix, material, every kind of leather, screws, stainless steel, whatever it is you might use in your products. These are available in databases, and we pay a license at the moment to use that database. If those are made freely available, and I think the European Union wants to do that, this language is coming into the building industry now quite quickly through EPDs, environmental product declarations. I don't see it in product design enough, product industry. The test industries, I think there are things going on in Europe called PEFs, product environmental footprinting for industries. Furniture industry hasn't been selected. So that seems crazy to me because there are so many products related to that industry. So I think we're further away from the labelling than I would like to be, but I agree with Mike, it is the answer. We have to get to a situation where, like our food, like our clothes, we know what's in our product, and if it's damaging, the better the rating, the cheaper it should be. Simple as that. More cost effective.
Also,
so it's who pays for it.
Within the projects that you'll be undertaking, these guys will be providing you with that raw data and the means of counting it as well. So it really is as simple as inputting it. But I did it actually just for my personal life. Like I actually spent quite a lot of time on the internet. You can find all of this data. People are doing studies all the time about the carbon implications of things. And David, as he says, they're paying for a service which is kind of fact-checked and verified scientifically, but there are lots of kind of comparable studies that you can look at and kind of calculate it. So you can work out what are the carbon emissions of flying here today. It's about 600 kilograms of CO2. And all you have to do is Google that information and then put that all down, and then you can kind of work out what it is. I think the average person in the UK emits about 10 tonnes a year of carbon dioxide, so I made myself a database, and now I'm trying to live for 5. And actually it's pretty easy, and it's very easy to do, so don't be daunted by it. It's quite simple.
So I think it's nearly lunchtime, so I'm just keeping some questions and going right to the end. And I'd love to know which are your expectations from this process? What you particularly, not them, what are you wanting or expecting to learn from these people?
I'd love to see.
Go on.
I'd love to see. The thing that always excites me in projects like this is when you see people using the material in a new way. So maybe not just a different shape of chair, but a different way of using the wood to create that chair. For me personally, when I'm on juries and panels of these kinds of things, or we worked recently on a student project back in the UK with the university. The most exciting projects for me were the ones where they really got deep into the material and tried to get something out of that kind of exploration, rather than just saying, oh, this is nice wood, I'll make a table with it. Personally.
Yeah, no, I would echo that, because we go into the unknown with a group of people we don't know, or whatever kind of project we're doing, and there's always a kind of risk or challenge or excitement about what's going to come out. But we create opportunities where we're a different kind of client than you would normally get, so there is a freedom to express and to be creative, and that's what I'm looking for. That's the excitement, I think, when we start to see how you will all approach the brief and the material. However much we've done a group discussion and you've all got the same bit of wood, I know we're going to get 30 different ideas out, and that's going to be really exciting, because that's how I've learned how the design process works and how important it is for people like us, and how we can use that, in our communication, and for our industries need to learn that more. There needs to be a better communication between those professions. So
I would just add, reiterate that, and I think it's just creating more of a two-way communication. Whenever we're engaging somebody new for the first time, we always get something back we didn't expect. There's always a new way of looking at things. We have a tendency, because we've been in the wood industry for a couple of years between us, things that we just assume are known, you realize they're not. So it helps us with our communication to wider audiences when we get feedback. Again, particularly from new young designers, hands-on, you're actually working with the material. Your feedback to us is fundamental in how we communicate with designers and manufacturers elsewhere in the world as well.
I mean, I've learned something this morning. This has been probably the most intense sort of environmental discussion that we've had at any of our sort of debates and workshops and things in recent years. And that to me means that's exciting, because whatever the outcome, whatever materials, whatever you go on to do, we've all learned a little bit of something in today's discussion that we can apply to our own business or our own life. And, there's a positive out of it already, I think, in that sense. So I'm kind of more excited than I was before today.
Great.
And you've all stayed awake and you all seem really keen. So that's the first bit. And we want to help you learn, and we want to learn from you. So,
and we got a trip to Spain.
We do.
That was my next question.
And Mike's got to worry about how much it costs.
And I would like to also ask you for what do you think is the extra value that AIDI is giving to this project? As an association of designers, we are in a very similar position as, obviously we are not a huge network, we are not producers, we are not, we work more towards collaboration and shared learning processes. So we were really excited about your challenge. So it's not a challenge just for them, it's just also for us. We are loving this and we are enjoying it a lot. It's again a super broad question. I'm so bad with concrete questions. But what do you expect from our network, rather than just the participants?
Oh, I think you've already delivered, because it's the reason we're doing the project. The fact that you've got an entity or a body. I mean, there are institutions, trade associations, some work, some don't. But where you've got like-minded professionals collaborating or sharing ideas, or joining some kind of group or prepared to work together, and you have connected and helped us find this group, and you've got the vision to try and do that, but for your generation, for like-minded people, it's brilliant. And I have to be honest, I think it's the first group that we've come across in Europe. And when Carlos rang me up, if you don't know, Carlos is the guy that's coordinated and made all this happen. He lives in Madrid, and we've been working together over 25 years. And he said, we wanted to do another competition. I found the catalyst, and it's the Young Designers Group. So don't feel embarrassed. I honestly, it's brilliant. It's got the energy. So you've done it already, and you keep doing this. I think it bodes well for a long-term collaboration.
Well, is there anything else you want to ask, to add to this?
I think somebody mentioned lunch. So.
Yeah. I think people is hungry already.
Yeah.
Bueno, os lo pregunto en español. Yo quería saber si durante el proceso de diseño vamos a poder estar en contacto con vosotros si tenéis alguna duda técnica.